So the growth markets are evolving significantly, and over the course of the history of Simon-Kucher, there's been a lot of challenges, particularly so recently. Sara, how are you navigating this or seeing this play out in the market?
It's been really interesting, especially over the last year or so, that growth is happening faster and faster, and the speed of change in which the broader economic environment is happening it seems like it changes almost on a day-to-day basis. I know, at least in the high-tech world, that's been the trend, but it's happening at an exponential pace.
Yeah, certainly within industrials where I focus, we're used to a bit more steady growth, and the pace of change, the effect of tariffs, the effect of geopolitical is causing companies to rethink their supply chains, to rethink their commercial practices, and certainly to become much more adaptable in their growth strategy.
I think that it's been interesting that early in the 2020s, it was volume at all costs, like just win business. But I think there's been a fundamental shift to how do we grow more sustainably? How do we grow more profitably? How do we make sure that we're not just making decisions to do so quickly, but to do so in more of a sustainable and long-term fashion, even though things are changing at a breakneck speed.
And I know that you have bigger markets than just the U.S. How have you seen this change across the region, the Americas region?
I do think that the overall trend has been consistent, where growth was fast in general, but now it's gone even faster in the last few years. But navigating a startup versus navigating a multi-billion-dollar organization is very different situations.
We've seen essentially de-globalization happening in real time within my client base, and it's a real strain on a system, because for years it was about outsourcing production centers, trying to get costs out of the system, become globally efficient. And with the changing dynamics of the markets, it's now much more about regionalization. It's about being adaptable within the region and greater autonomy, which has been an interesting shift.
Yeah, I do think that while you're right, there's additional kind of localization, especially in the Americas, of how people are doing business. I do feel like some of the companies that at least I've worked with tend to be younger. And of course, it's easier to attack your home market first. And so, especially in a more digital world, the tariffs and all of that haven't impacted them as much, but for any other non-digital, manufacturing consumer business, like that is a huge shift in the way that they need to operate.
When you look back over the last 5-6 years, the first with COVID, and then the inflation, the monetary policies, and now with tariffs and deglobalization, the pace of change is just mind-boggling. And what management teams have to do to be able to deal with this has really placed a lot of burden on the systems. There's certainly always been a focus on moving toward more data, incorporating AI, trying to gain efficiency in commercial systems. But I still think there's a decent emphasis on the need of just good leadership development, having the right incentive systems to support good commercial decision making, and not getting so fixated on one metric and trying to optimize for that metric that they lose sight of holistic profitability and growth.
I do think that there's just a ton of pressure to not just grow now, but grow profitably. I think it was kind of a virtuous cycle where it was all about volumes. Like, as long as you get the people in the door, we can figure out profitability later. But given interest rates increasing and people not having as much access to cash, means that they have to be a lot more thoughtful about what they're spending. Therefore, companies really need to provide value in order to win business. And I think that's not just a technology phenomenon, but that happens across all industries in order to win a market.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, in the industries that I service, which are much more oriented on physical goods, infrastructure, there's always been a tremendous emphasis placed on building the next product that delivers incremental value, but not necessarily a lot of emphasis on monetizing very well on that incremental value being delivered. Rather, it was seen a bit as a way to fight commoditization of the product. And so the real trick these days is, in a really fast-paced world where you're deglobalizing and in some respects shrinking the base of suppliers, how do you still position yourself, monetize on this, and capture the value from the innovation in the market?
The industries that I've worked in, obviously a lot of those companies are driving AI capabilities, which means a lot of companies are having to actually use more AI. What are you seeing with the trends of how humans and leaders need to interact with AI and the expertise they need to have in order to survive?
At Simon-Kucher, we've done a lot of work with organizations trying to embed AI into their commercial organizations, but still maintain that human decision-making loop on top of the efficiency gains from AI. So it's a balance between powering your faster decision-making, but also getting the leverage out of the data already in the organization, which is very helpful.
I've definitely seen that the power that effective leaders have is to not just say, hey, we're going to stick our challenge into AI and have it tell us what to do, but really have it be a starting point to facilitate a conversation around what do we think makes sense and not. So deep expertise that allows a person who can process context across their whole lives really, really make a difference compared to a machine that has no context on what's happening in a business or a business environment.
Yeah, indeed. At Simon-Kucher, I continue to see our expertise and real deep functional knowledge and experience being the added value on top of AI. So I don't feel like we're getting commoditized anytime soon, because you really need the blend of the two.
And I would say, additionally, it's not just deep expertise in one topic, but having deep experts across multiple industry verticals, because companies no longer fit into neat boxes of, hey, you're industrials, you're software. Like, they're mixes of multiple industries.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's a real convergence of industries and technical capabilities occurring right now, and having that multifaceted view is really, really important.
Yep. Given how rapidly everything is changing, it feels like, hey, I need to be reactive to what's going on right now and deal with the change that's happening right now. But you can't just be reactive. You have to think about the long term. How have you seen companies handling the long term?
The more things change, the more they stay the same. Turbulence is always going to exist in the markets. It always has. I mean, we went through this period of COVID. Who would have ever thought that? We went through monetary expansion, rapid inflation, steady, concerted managerial systems, good data-driven decision-making still remains the order of the day. And management teams need to be able to slow down the decision-making cycle to make the right decisions as opposed to feeling too pressured. I think way too many companies right now are just too reactive. And the real message, and certainly we see a lot of that in the US currently, and what we're telling our clients at Simon-Kucher is to slow down and really be thoughtful and plan actions that are still going to be valid in 3 to 5 years or 10 years' time.
Yeah, definitely. I think that making sure you're moving quickly against your goal, but making sure, one, you're setting the goal clearly, having a strategy around how you're approaching it to align the broader organization, but to your point, sticking to fundamentals like the vast turbulence and volatility, like that is noise. it doesn't mean that, hey, you should fundamentally change how you run a business and have a business plan and make sure that you're executing across it consistently. And I think that one of the most interesting things I've seen is like, it's only when a company moves too far and starts to break things that they're willing to say, hey, let's be thoughtful about it. And I think that it's important that companies are thoughtful to begin with, and not cause things to break and honestly you to lose customers and churn and really harm kind of the core fundamentals of the business.
A more succinct way of saying this is fast and wrong is still wrong.
Yeah.
So take your time.
Yeah.
So Sara, when we step back at what Simon-Kucher has accomplished over the last 20, 30 years, especially in the software space, what do you see as being the real value add that differentiates us today?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I think one of the big ones is that we have deep expertise in the topics that we're addressing. We've seen these challenges that companies are facing multiple times over, and so have our teams. And to really be able to pull from that deep well of knowledge is really differentiating for companies. I would also say that, you know, we very much like to partner with our clients. You know, it's not a, hey, you know, we're the expert and we think you should do this. It's, hey, let's work together to make sure that the changes that you're making work for your organization, and we want to have that be a journey with you rather than saying, hey, this is what the data says and go do this.
Yeah, I think it's, to your point, really being trusted functional experts in commercial growth. Mm-hmm. And we are the trusted commercial growth advisors, and we have the deep experience that's hard to replicate. And so we really have a holistic view of what's occurring in the industry and then what really works specifically in that area.
Yeah.
Simon-Kucher, better growth really means achieving better outcomes, not only for the company commercially, but also for all the stakeholders within the company. How have you seen that develop within your client base?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that it's important to balance short-term growth versus longer-term sustainable growth. It's too easy for tech companies to make short-term, you know, holding period decisions, but making sure it's balanced with having a good fundamentals for sustainable growth over time. I think it's very clear that how growth happens and how companies navigate it has changed just rapidly over the last even year or two, and making sure that it is addressed with deep functional expertise, a mind to long-term growth, and really having more of a cross-industry, cross-commercial strategy capabilities view on it is super important to managing the complexity that companies are dealing with right now.
Yeah, reflecting on this conversation, it's clear that better growth is becoming more complex, that the speeds of the market as well as the turbulence in the market requires commercial teams to be very agile. And it's really refreshing to be able to help our clients here at Simon-Kucher to do this.